On episode 679 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Dr. Adi Jaffe and discuss his book, Unhooked: Free Yourself from Addiction Forever. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allen, an online health and fitness coach and author of the Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, I hope this finds you well. Not much going on here, so let's just get on with the podcast. Our guest today is a nationally recognized expert on mental health, addiction, relationships, and shame. Formerly a lecturer in the UCLA Psychology Department and the executive director and co-founder of one of the most progressive mental health treatment facilities in the country, he is the founder of the IGNTD Recovery. He attended UCLA, graduating with a BA and a PhD in psychology, using both his personal experience and his research to work with clients. He now writes for Psychology Today and has been featured in CNN, the Huffington Post, Insider, and the Los Angeles Times, amongst many other outlets. With no further ado, here's Dr. Adi Jaffe. Dr. Jaffe, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the book is called Unhooked: Free Yourself from Addiction Forever.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good promise.
Yeah. It's a good promise. I'm honest right off the bat that I'm not promising an easy solution. I'm promising a robust and comprehensive one. And I think, having worked with thousands of people, I stand behind that promise.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. As I got into this book, I was like, I'm going to have to completely relearn everything I know about habits,
Mm.
because this is all tied together in that concept. But the things we know now, what you're bringing up in the book, they expand on what I thought I knew.
Oh, that's great to hear. I love it. That was really the point of writing the book is, there are books like Atomic Habits, Tiny Habits, and things like that that I think are great. Although I think they're great for things like I'd like to start running more in the morning, or I want to make these adjustments in my life. The people I work with struggle deeply with what I call compulsive habits. So habits that they've already tried to break many, many times and have been hard to do so, and they're harming their life.
Right. Because it digs a lot deeper. The longer you've been doing this, the deeper it is. It's like it becomes who you are, not just how you act.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a quote. I don't think it made it into this book, but there's because my publisher thought it was a little too trite or often repeated. There's a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, I believe, which is, your thoughts become your beliefs become your value becomes your actions, your action become your habits become you make you who you are. And so, who are we? But the what we do every day, the people that we surround ourselves with, right, and the environment that we are in. I think that's a big piece of the puzzle actually that I talk about in the book quite a bit. That's why I was so happy to come on this podcast in particular. Fitness education, health became a huge part of my own recovery, if you will, because taking care of myself almost ended up shifting who I am and how I show up every day.
Yeah. So now, alcohol and other addictions are often kind of related to, and they're called a disease. And
Yeah.
and I get why we want to call them a disease, because from a doctor's perspective, once something's a disease, well, now we have license to treat it.
Mm, that's a
We
great
have
point. Yeah.
license to develop drugs and other ways that we can treat this thing. Uh, Ergo, there's some financial incentive. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
you compare disease to syndrome. Can you kind of talk about those two and where we actually are in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we say disease, what typically we mean by disease is we've identified a biological underpinning of a condition, and when it happens over and over and over, you get this outcome, right? So, uh, a specific kind of cancer would be a disease, right? You get a disease from a specific virus that impacts a specific system in your body. Um, a syndrome is just a set of symptoms that show up together, but their etiology, the reason that they showed up could be totally different. So, and then I give a couple like irritable bowel syndrome, right? It's a syndrome because the symptoms are you have to go to the bathroom a lot and your stomach is uneasy, but it could be a biological thing, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be having eaten something, or having environmental toxins in your system. All those are completely different things. The reason it's an important distinction is the way you would treat them is different. The idea behind the disease model, and you mentioned one definite aspect that people have been going after for decades with no real luck, by the way, is you can find a medication that will fix the disease. Nobody, just so it's very, very clear, and I want to say it outright. So, I'm a research psychologist by training, so I try to not say things emphatically as a guarantee, but nobody has found a medication to treat addiction. Nobody has found the addictive gene. These things do not exist. And why do they do not exist? Because addiction is not one thing. That's the point I make in the book. Addiction has never been one thing. So by calling it a disease, what we've done is we've made people believe that they're all part of one group, but they're not. And, the reality is once we believe something, we will fit the data in the world around us to match that condition. So that's why I think it's a really important distinction to understand. Your symptoms could look like somebody else's, but the reason you develop them could be totally different.
Okay, now so yeah, the standard of habits, the way I was taught was there's a trigger, there's an action, and there's a reward.
Yeah.
But in your book, you said unhooked, and you talk about hooks related to, particularly usually to pain.
Mm.
Can you kind of relate that? I'd like to kind of put that together. So when I brought up earlier about habits and all is because to me that's where it kind of for me habits unraveled when when you said that because I was like, okay, why do I do what I do? And some things I
Mm.
know I do are a habit, but when we start talking about addiction and other things, this we're trying to address something. We're actually trying to fix something. We're
Yeah.
actually, if you will, medicating in many
Yeah.
cases. So what's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just start at the beginning of what you just said, which is what you just talked about is a remnant of the behaviorist school of thought, right? This is a B.F. Skinner. If I talk about this in the book, if you ever heard about or thought about those experiments with rats pushing levers in boxes, right? Which, by the way, is part of how I did my dissertation. That's a behaviorist way of thinking, and it was the predominant way of thinking in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. The idea was just this. We do things randomly. Some things get rewarded, some things get nothing, some things get punished. We move towards the thing and we do more of the things that get rewarded, and everything else kind of goes away. The things that get punished, we hopefully do less of, right? That's the idea. That flies in the face of addiction, right? Because many, many people get punished over and over and over for the behavior that they do. And so, why aren't they stopping it? Number one. But number two, there's a reason why behaviorism, even though it's a really, really nice, simple way to explain what we do, never actually caught on in psychology as a therapeutic approach. Because all it explains is the what, it explains nothing about the why. And there's actually a behaviorist component of the entire methodology, which is to disregard the why. And what do I mean by the why is humans, right? The why is our thoughts. The why is our beliefs. The why is our feelings. But in actuality, I believe at least that's what makes us human, right? What makes us human is the internal experience that we have, not just the actions that we take. So what I did in Unhooked is essentially I took behaviorism. There is a trigger and there is an action, and then there's an outcome. But then I put part of cognitive behavioral therapy in there. So what I say in the book is you don't ever actually react to the trigger in your life. I actually give an example from like a literally like a gun trigger that I won't go too deep into, but I explain it in a really visual way. We don't react to the trigger. We react to the feelings that our perception of the trigger created. I'll give an example really, really quickly that is in the book, right? If somebody says, I don't know if I can swear on this. I'll keep it peachy. If somebody says, "Hey, a-hole," to you while you're walking in the street, if you perceive that as somebody putting you down, being aggressive towards you, or starting a fight with you, if that's the way you perceive what they're saying, your reaction may be to have anxiety and fear if you're scared of that, or to start getting riled up and aggressive and violent yourself, believing that you have to somehow now knock them out or start a fight with them. But if your perception is that it's a friend of yours who's just joking, you haven't seen each other in a while, and it's like a friendly, off colored way of getting your attention, you may smile, laugh at them, run, and give them a hug. Same exact trigger, completely different reaction. That's important for us to understand because while most people try to, most almost everybody, when they try to change a habit, they focus on the triggers or they focus on the habit, on the behavior. And we can talk about that a little bit here in a minute too. What I tell people is the magic is in the perception and the feelings. Just before we went on about 40 minutes, I only got home at 1 o'clock yesterday because we were on a trip. Just a little bit before we got on, I did a cold plunge. We have a pool in the back and it's not heated. So I just jumped in there for, just like 2, 3 minutes. That's a habit that, by the way, does not cause a lot of reward, right? It doesn't feel good when I jump in a cold pool, but I know because my perception is that it makes me better later, so it gives me feelings of calm and confidence, right? So there are a lot of habits that I've taken on in my life that wouldn't follow behaviorist methodologies at all because they don't feel good, right? A hard workout where I'm panting in the end and I'm barely breathing doesn't feel good. And I would argue, and this is the point I make in the book, the reason habits become habits is because you've practiced them for so long, they don't take effort to do anymore. And that's a magical element in the book and in the recognition of behavioral change. If you just look for the rewards, you'll be mistaken and you'll be led down the wrong path oftentimes. Look for the behaviors that create the life. Remember, we talked in the beginning about who you are. They create the life that you want to create. And that's the point that I make in the book is once you understand your perception, I can play with my perception. I can say, well, I don't want to care that much about what somebody walking down the street says to me. So even if it's somebody I don't know and they say that to me, my perception now in my life shifts to they must be having a really bad day. It has nothing to do with me. Now I'm not aggravated. I'm not anxious. Somebody can say something like that to me in the middle of the street. It happens all the time on social media, by the way.
Yes,
And
it
I can
does.
just take and I can just take a deep breath and it doesn't affect my day at all.
Good, good. So let's talk a little bit about behavior and behavior choice.
Yeah. Um, okay. So I have this process in the book called EAT. And my joke, and again, it's great for a fitness podcast, right? You have to watch what you eat to be healthy. You also have to watch what you eat psychologically to be mentally healthy. So eat gets broken down into explore, accept, transform. Um, One of the big points I make in the book is a lot of us run away from negative experiences in life. When something happens that we don't like, we try to, brush it under the rug, ignore it, avoid it, tell nobody about it, and really even emotionally not process it that much. I get it, right? It doesn't feel good to have things turn badly. But in reality, the most successful people on the face of the planet, when something doesn't go right, they don't run away from it. They sit and analyze what happened. They accept it and then they go change it. And so I think all of us need to start understanding how to use eat, explore, accept, transform is what that breaks down into in our own lives. And so just based on the piece that we just talked about even a few minutes ago, if you're trying, let's say you're trying to control your drinking. Let's use that. A lot of people, it's still the beginning of the year. A lot of people are trying to reduce their drinking or eliminate their drinking. Let's say you've done well for a number of days or even a few weeks, and then you have a bad day. What do most people do if they have a bad day when they're trying to quit drinking?
They go back.
They go back. They go, oh, I failed, right? I can't do this. Even if they don't go that far, they may say, oh, I'll try again some other time. This is not, this must not be the right time, etc. I say, look, pause and say, well, I know I'm serious about trying to do this, and it didn't work. I had 5 drinks last night, and I didn't want to drink at all. Let's pause and understand what happened. Again, in the book in Unhooked, I give you a whole step by step way to analyze where did my night go wrong. Once you explore it, you will identify some of those weaknesses, some of those problems. It could be a relationship problem, it could be a work problem, it could be a biological issue, it could be things back from your childhood. Whatever it is you find out, the next piece is acceptance. And I say, you got to make peace with your imperfections before we can go change them. And then it's about transformation. And I can talk about an endless number of examples from the book. I talk about a lot of specific examples from clients and my own life, just so people can understand how to apply this. But to my mind, once you've come to terms with why you engage in these bad habits, transformation is actually kind of a fun scavenger hunt because now you're looking for tools like in health and fitness. Now you're looking for tools that'll make it better. And when you understand the underlying problem, you really do want to make it better.
Yeah. You had an example of a young woman, and she had like crazy anxiety before an event, and she was throwing up and everything. So, but she was embarrassed, and someone at one point gave her some cannabis, and that was her medicine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I love that you use that example because I think the reason I put that example in there is we've all been through elementary school, junior high, and high school. And I don't know about you, but somewhere towards the end of junior high, beginning of high school, were some of the worst periods of my life. It was just like this cliquish place. I never felt like I fit in. I had a lot of anxiety all the time. Well, this client in particular had really terrible anxiety. As you mentioned, she was an athlete and in student government, and she would throw up before every meet, right? And it embarrassed the heck out of her. I mean, everybody's looking at her, standing outside the bus, throwing up on the grounds, and that friend one day walks up to her, gives her a joint, and kind of hides it. And she takes one hit off this joint and she stops throwing up. And so weed became her way of dealing with her social anxiety um, for 35 years. And the thing is that 35 years later, she didn't remember that she started smoking weed because she was throwing up in junior high on the side of the bus. She just knew that she's been smoking weed for 35 years. We had to go back and fix the social anxiety. And the moment we did that, this woman blossomed and came out of her shell and became a totally different person and didn't need to smoke weed anymore.
And so that's what this kind of really is particularly the eat part is you got to figure out what this is, what this emotionally is, what this behaviorally is, and get to the root cause because it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the trigger that's the problem because you can't always I mean, you can't avoid anxiety. If you have anxiety, you have anxiety.
Yeah. No, I love that you got right down to the meat of it. You know, people try to avoid triggers, but you can try to avoid triggers all you want unless you sit in a room by yourself and don't let anybody else come in, which by the way, that's not true, right? Because then boredom, loneliness, and isolation could be your triggers, right? So
Yeah.
there's really no way to avoid the triggers. We have to shift the way we process them. And for this woman, when she realized it wasn't about weed, it was about social anxiety, ironically, one of the treatment approaches was to take her into like a public speaking forum that she went into, where she learned how to get up in front of people sober and speak up. It was hard. She didn't really want to do it, but the moment that part was done, for the first time in her life, she trusted herself in front of others. Because really, the reason, and I've had this myself, the reason she had social anxiety, which a lot of people probably relate to as they hear this, it was fear of embarrassing yourself. It was fear of not being enough. It was fear of being mocked. And ironically, therefore, the weed, which gave her problems 30, 35 years later, and the reason it gave her problems wasn't because she was dysfunctional. She wanted to be a teacher. She couldn't get a job as a teacher because they drug test. And so it kept her from living the life that she wanted. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road for a lot of us, right? Um, if you're in a bad marriage, and this happens all over the country all the time. If you're in a bad marriage, for whatever reason, I'm not saying it's bad because the other person's bad or you haven't tried it. Just the marriage isn't working out right now, and you drink every night in order to just be able to not care about it, or you watch porn so that you don't have to deal with your wife and don't have to go seek out sex because you guys aren't relating. Doing those things numbs the pain right? It avoids the conflict, but it doesn't fix the marriage. And so what ends up happening over time is the problem actually gets worse, not better.
Hmm. Now, you have another acronym. I love acronyms and I love lists. So I'm always going to get drawn to those when I'm reading a book. But the other
Sure.
acronym you had that I think is really important is SPARROW,
Yeah.
SPARO. Could you talk through that acronym and how that's useful for us?
Yeah, and maybe I'm assuming there's video with this podcast because of what we're doing right now. I can send you a picture from the book that is in the book that is a big part of the sparrow eat cycle. So, in order to help people make it easier to understand, or I can give people a link where they can go find this online. In order to give people an easy way to remember everything, this can be complex. So, sparrow is stimulus, which is the trigger, perception, activation, response, and outcome. SPARO. And the reason lay that out is when an outcome happens that you don't like, the question is what went wrong? When you got triggered, what was the perception? What feelings or activation got caused? And then what was the response? And I'll talk about the response just a little bit in there because we haven't mentioned it yet. What ends up happening to everybody I've worked with is when they're scared or anxious, they have this menu of potential responses they can have. Let's say you get embarrassed, one option is to leave. Another option would be to take a hit of weed, right? Another option may be to meditate or, go for a jog. Each one of those actions has a cost to it, right? So, like that woman I was talking about, when she's in junior high, leaving would actually be more embarrassing, right? Imagine you're on a sports team and you run out of the room because you're so embarrassed you can't complete the play. That's even worse, right? So the cost of doing that is really, really high. Meditation or breath work might be an option, but you may not know it. So it may not be available to you. Going for a run again, it may work for you, but you may be in the middle of a student assembly. You can't go for a jog right now. So we choose from a limited menu of options. And one of the things I teach people in the transform part of EAT is we now live in a world where you can explore new response options for what your trouble is so easily, right? On your phone, on your laptop, anywhere you want, you can go and find with ChatGPT now, you can literally put in a request saying, "Hey, I struggle with anxiety. Teach me about 50 techniques and podcasts and books I should listen to help with my anxiety." What I help you do in the book is get a little more specific even. I have anxiety about embarrassing myself in front of other people. I have anxiety bringing up uncomfortable topics to my husband or wife, right? So if you get even more specific, you get even better tools.
That's awesome. So, Dr. Jaffe, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are three strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Mm. Um, wow. Okay. Number one for me, as we talked about before, is really look inside of yourself more often than outside, right? I talk about this thing called the sphere of influence in my book. My recommendation for everybody is focus most of your effort, most of your energy on a daily basis on the things you can do to make life better. You control more of them, and over time, you can improve in them substantially. Secondly, for me, and there are probably two corollaries here that I'll do together, is create a daytime, a morning, and an evening ritual in your life. Um, it doesn't matter what yours are. I give some ideas in the book, and I talk about specific aspects to why these are important. But having rituals and bookends to your day will give you consistency, energy, will build up your self confidence over time. And then the last piece is probably teach yourself to always challenge yourself and do something hard, close to as every day as you can. Ironically, those things don't have to be physical. I talked about doing a cold plunge earlier today. They don't have to be physical. I took on a gratitude practice 10, 12 years ago, which was really hard for me because I'm either biologically programmed or through my early childhood experiences programmed to always see what isn't working in my life and what I need to fix. So having a gratitude practice was something that was really uncomfortable and hard at first. It has now become a part of my daily morning ritual. Um, but I think doing something hard every day to prove to yourself that you're capable is another piece of what can make you actually ironically happy. I just wrote an article about that for Psychology Today too. We can link to that.
Okay. So Doctor, if someone wanted to learn more about you, learn more about your book, Unhooked, where would you like for me to send them?
Well, first of all, I have a website called readunhooked.com, which is we set up specifically for the book. Look at it over there. I also have a website with my name, djaffe.com, if you're interested in learning even more of the stuff that I do besides the book itself. But read Unhooked for the book, djaffe.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. And if you're in social media, I'm, on all platforms, I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe. So Dr. Adi Jaffe.
Okay. And then, yes, if you'll send me those links to the spiral diagram and the article you just spoke about, I'll be sure to include those in the show notes as well.
I'll do it right after this.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Dr. Jaffe, thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan. This was great.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Dr. Michael Aziz and discuss his book, The Ageless Revolution. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.